Just as Jesus stunned the crowds by embracing and defending the woman everyone else wanted to condemn, Pope Leo XIV has stepped into history with a gesture so radical, so full of mercy, that it's shaking the foundations of the Church. In a world still scarred by prejudice and exclusion, Leo XIV dares to love as Jesus did, reaching out to those society rejects. What you're about to discover isn't just a story, it's a revelation that will challenge everything you thought you knew about compassion, faith, and true leadership. Subscribe now and tell us, should the Church follow Jesus' example like Pope Leo XIV did? Drop your thoughts below. His commitment was not only spiritual but deeply human and practical. Prevost understood that dignity isn't just preached, it's built. That's why, in collaboration with religious congregations like the Adorers and the Missionaries of Charity, as well as social leaders like Silvia Teodolinda Vasquez, he launched programs for the accompaniment and reintegration of women who had been victims of prostitution and trafficking. These programs offered not just shelter and protection, but also vocational training, psychological support, and most importantly, a community where these women could feel accepted and valued. One of the most moving testimonies comes from Silvia Teodolinda Vasquez, who worked side by side with Prevost for years in Chiclayo. Monsignor Robert never judged. When he came to the shelter, he greeted each woman by name, sat down to listen to their stories, sometimes even cried with them. He reminded them that their past did not define them, that they were beloved daughters of God and deserved a new chance. Silvia recalls how on one occasion, Prevost publicly defended a group of women who were being discriminated against by neighborhood residents. He said no one has the right to point fingers or exclude, and that the Church must be a home for everyone, especially the most wounded. Prevost's presence in these spaces was discreet but constant. He didn't seek cameras or headlines. He preferred anonymity, quiet work, and transformation that begins with the small things. He visited sewing and baking workshops where women learned trades, shared simple meals in community kitchens, celebrated Mass in improvised chapels, and above all, listened. Listening is the deepest form of love, he often said, and through listening, many women found for the first time someone who saw them not as a problem, but as a person with dreams, wounds, and hopes. The impact of his work was tangible. Dozens of women managed to break the cycle of exploitation and rebuild their lives. Some became community leaders, others started small businesses, many repaired relationships with their families, and most importantly, regained confidence in themselves. Prevost celebrated every small step forward as a major victory. There are no instant miracles, he explained, but every step toward freedom and dignity is a silent miracle worth celebrating. Beyond his direct work with women, Prevost promoted awareness in both the Church and the wider community. He organized workshops, talks, and meetings to educate people about the realities of trafficking and prostitution, breaking down prejudice and stigma. He insisted that true charity is not just giving, but also fighting for justice and inclusion. Under his leadership, the Diocese of Chiclayo became a national reference point for defending women's rights and promoting human dignity. A lesser-known but fundamental aspect was his ability to build bridges between different sectors. Prevost engaged in dialogue with local authorities, police, business people, and civil organizations to seek comprehensive solutions. He wasn't satisfied with immediate assistance. He wanted to change structures, create opportunities, and transform mindsets. Trafficking and prostitution are not just individual problems, they are social wounds that affect us all, he said in his homilies. If one woman is exploited, the whole community is wounded. His pastoral style was deeply evangelical, close, compassionate, and courageous. Inspired by Jesus' example, who never feared to approach the marginalized, Prevost broke through barriers of prejudice and fear. The Church cannot be complicit in silence or indifference, he said. Our mission is to be where no one else wants to be, to accompany those no one else wants to accompany. The women themselves are the best reflection of his impact. Monsignor Robert was the first person to look me in the eyes without judging me, says Maria, one of the beneficiaries of the reintegration program. Thanks to him, I believed my life could change. Again. Another woman, Anna, remembers, when everyone turned their back on me, he reached out his hand. He didn't just help me leave the streets, he taught me to forgive myself and start over. Prevost also encouraged other dioceses and congregations to replicate these programs. He shared resources, experiences and strategies, convinced that the fight against exploitation and marginalization must be a joint effort. His vision was clear: it's not enough to save a few. We have to change the culture, create a church and a society where no woman is discarded. His legacy in Peru lives on. Many of the projects he launched continue today, expanded and strengthened by new generations of social and religious leaders. The seed he planted in Chiclayo has borne fruit across the country, inspiring others to commit themselves to the most vulnerable. In summary, Leo XIV's action in Peru was much more than charitable aid. It was a radical commitment to dignity, justice, and hope. His closeness to women victims of prostitution and trafficking was not an isolated gesture, but the core of a life dedicated to others. He chose to be where he was most needed, challenged prejudice, broke silences, and above all, restored hope to those who had lost it. Today, as Pope Leo XIV continues to remind the world that the true greatness of the Church is not found in its temples or riches, but in its ability to love and dignify the least among us. His story in Peru is an invitation to look into the eyes of those who suffer, to reach out without fear, and to build a future together where no one is invisible or discarded. Behind every social initiative, reintegration program, and pastoral action of Leo XV in Peru, there are profound human stories, stories marked by suffering, struggle, and ultimately hope. These are the accounts of women who, after years of exclusion and pain, found in then Bishop Robert Prevost not only a spiritual guide, but also a friend, an advocate, and a companion on their journey to dignity. Maria rebirth from pain. Maria arrived at the shelter run by the Adorers in Chiclayo after a life scarred by violence. From a young age, she was a victim of abuse, and after becoming pregnant, she was expelled from her home. With no resources or support, she fell into the hands of a trafficking ring that exploited her for years. I had nowhere to go. Nobody wanted to help me. I felt invisible, as if my life was worthless, she recalls, her voice trembling. Her first encounter with Monsignor Prevost was during a mass at the shelter. He didn't look at me with pity, but with respect. He greeted me by name, asked how I was, and most importantly, listened without judgment. From that day on, Maria began participating in workshops and slowly regained her self-confidence. Monsignor Robert encouraged me to study, to learn a trade. He told me my past was not a sentence that I could start over. Today, Maria runs a small sewing workshop and helps other women move forward. If I am alive and have hope, it's thanks to God and people like him. Anna, the value of being heard. Anna was a victim of sexual exploitation from adolescence. For years, she lived on the streets exposed to violence and discrimination. People saw me as trash. No one wanted to come near me. Her life changed when a volunteer brought her to the support center, backed by the Diocese of Chiclayo, where she met Prevost, who visited regularly. What impressed me most was that he was never in a hurry. He would sit beside me, ask about my family, my dreams. He made me feel important, as if my life had value. Anna began attending therapy sessions and bakery workshops. Over time, she reconciled with her mother and now works at a local bakery. Monsignor Robert taught me to forgive myself and believe I deserve happiness. Sylvia Teodolinda Vasquez, the tireless ally. Sylvia was not a direct victim, but her life was marked by her fight alongside exploited women. As a social leader and collaborator with the Adorers, she witnessed Prevost's commitment firsthand. He was always available. He didn't just come to celebrate Mass, he stayed. Afterward, talked with the girls, gave advice, encouraged them not to give up. Many times when someone relapsed or had a crisis, he was the first to show up no matter the hour. Sylvia recalls a particularly difficult occasion. A young woman who had been rescued tried to take her own life. Monsignor Robert came to the hospital and stayed all night with her. He held her hand, prayed, and spoke to her with such tenderness that when she woke up, she said she finally felt someone truly cared. For Sylvia Prevost's impact went far beyond material help. He gave them back their dignity and faith in themselves. Anonymous testimonies. The power of accompaniment. Not all women want or are able to share their stories publicly, but their anonymous testimonies speak of a common experience, feeling seen and valued for the first time. I'll never forget the day Monsignor Robert asked my name and looked me in the eyes. I felt that at last, someone saw me as a person and not a problem one woman shares. Another recounts, when I was on the street I thought God had abandoned me, but meeting Monsignor Robert and the sisters I felt God was giving me a second chance. Many agree that simply being listened to, being able to share their fears and dreams without judgment, was the first step toward healing. Stories of reconciliation and forgiveness. The recovery process was neither easy nor quick. Many women had to confront their own fears, guilt and social rejection. But the constant support of Prevost and his team gave them the strength to keep going. He told us, forgiveness starts with ourselves, that we're not responsible for what others did to us, but we are responsible for what we do with our future, one beneficiary recalls. Some managed to reconcile with their families, others found a new family in the shelter community. Several became volunteers dedicating their time to help others in the same situation. Monsignor Robert taught us that solidarity is the best way to heal, affirms one of the program's leaders. Impact on the community. Prevost's work not only transformed individual lives but also changed the community's perception. Seeing a bishop directly involved with the most marginalized women led many parishioners and neighbors to question their own prejudices. At first, some didn't understand why the church helped those women, but over time they saw that we are all children of God and no one deserves to be discarded, Sylvia shares. Thanks to awareness efforts, several parishes and civil organizations joined the cause, offering material support, scholarships and job opportunities. Monsignor Robert's presence was key to breaking stigma and opening doors, says a local priest. Stories of success and new beginnings. Today, many women who went through the reintegration programs have rebuilt their lives. Some have formed families, others have started small businesses, or are studying technical careers. I never thought I could have a normal life, but now I know anything is possible, says a former beneficiary who now works as a social worker. Prevost's legacy is reflected in every story of overcoming. He taught us that hope isn't an illusion, but a daily decision, says Anna. For Maria, the greatest lesson was learning to love herself. If I could move forward, any woman can, as long as she finds someone who believes in her. Conclusion: a network of hope. The stories of these women are living proof that accompaniment, listening and compassion can transform lives. Through his closeness and commitment, Leo XIV sowed seeds of hope that continue to bear fruit in Peru. His example inspires new generations of social, religious and lay leaders to continue the fight for the dignity of the most vulnerable women. In every testimony, a profound truth resounds: no one is condemned to live in pain or exclusion. With support, faith and opportunity, it is possible to be reborn and build a different future. The story of Leo XIV and the women of Chiclayo is an invitation to look beyond prejudice and to reach out to those who need it most. The story of Leo XIV, both before and after becoming Pope, is one of living faith with radical gospel authenticity, a compassion that becomes concrete action, and a message that challenges both the Church and the world to rediscover the deepest meaning of human dignity. His testimony, especially during his ministry in Peru, not only transformed individual lives but also planted seeds of change in collective mentality, inspiring many to look beyond prejudice and to commit themselves to the most vulnerable, a faith that becomes action. For Leo XIV, faith was never a set of abstract dogmas or empty rituals. Above all, it was a call to action, closeness, compassion, and justice. In every encounter with women, victims of trafficking and prostitution, with abandoned children, with families displaced by poverty, the living gospel was present. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Matthew 25:40. Prevost was never satisfied with words of comfort alone. His message was clear. True charity demands commitment, presence, and the transformation of unjust structures. We cannot be bench Christians, he often repeated. Faith demands that we go out to meet the other, especially those who suffer most. This conviction led him to personally involve himself in reintegration projects, to accompany long and painful processes, and to challenge the Church itself to be bolder and more consistent in its mission. Dignity at the center. One of the pillars of Leo XIV's message is the centrality of human dignity. For him, every person, regardless of their history, social status, or wounds, carries an inalienable dignity that must be recognized, defended, and promoted. There are no disposable lives, he affirmed at every opportunity. No one is so poor, so wounded, or so lost that they do not deserve a second chance. This vision translated into a profound respect for the women he accompanied. He never saw them as cases or problems to be solved, but as subjects of rights, protagonists of their own stories. The first step to healing is to look a person in the eye and recognize their worth, he said. This approach allowed many women who were used to distrust and rejection to open up trust and begin a process of integral healing. Inspired by the example of Jesus, Leo XIV's actions were deeply inspired by the figure of Jesus, especially in his dealings with the marginalized and excluded. In the Gospels, Jesus constantly breaks social and religious barriers to approach those whom society despises: lepers, tax collectors, women labeled as sinners. For Prevost, this was the model to follow. Jesus did not come to judge, but to heal and liberate. Our mission is to do the same. In his homilies and meetings, he often recalled the scene of the adulterous woman whom Jesus defended from stoning and offered a new life. "Has no one condemned you? Neither do I condemn you," he would quote. For Leo XIV, the Church must be that space of mercy where everyone can find welcome and hope without fear of judgment or rejection. Inclusion as the way of the Church. One of the great challenges Leo XIV embraced was building a truly inclusive Church, not just in words but in structures, attitudes, and practices. In Peru, he promoted the creation of safe spaces for women in vulnerable situations, encouraged the training of pastoral agents sensitive to the realities of trafficking and prostitution, and urged communities to open their doors to all without distinction. The Church cannot be a club for the perfect, he often said. It must be a field hospital, a home for everyone, especially for the wounded. Under his leadership, many parishes set aside moralistic attitudes and became places of encounter, listening, and accompaniment. This shift in mentality was neither easy nor immediate, but it laid the foundation for a pastoral approach closer to the gospel and to people's real lives. The value of accompaniment and listening. Leo XIV always insisted on the importance of personal accompaniment. He knew that deep wounds are not healed with speeches, but with presence, time, and listening. To accompany is to walk at the other's pace, to respect their timing, to sustain their hope, he explained. That's why he spent long hours talking with women, listening to their stories, sharing their joys and fears. This accompaniment generated a network of trust and mutual support that was key in the recovery processes. Many women, feeling listened to and valued, found the strength to rebuild their lives and help others along the same path. Accompaniment is the art of making a person feel they are not alone, he summarized. Hope as the motor of change. In all his messages, Leo XIV conveyed a realistic hope, not naive or superficial. He knew that the path to recovery was long and full of obstacles, but he also firmly believed in people's ability to be reborn. Hope is not waiting for everything to change magically, but believing that with effort and support it is possible to build a different future. This hope became a driving force for many women and communities. "If he believes in me, I can believe too," said those who knew him. The confidence he transmitted was contagious and generated a multiplying effect. Those who received help soon became agents of hope for others. A message for society and the Church. Leo XIV's message was not limited to the direct beneficiaries of his programs. It was a call to all society and the Church to examine their attitudes and structures. We cannot remain indifferent to the suffering of others, he warned. Indifference is the greatest sin of our time. In his public interventions, he invited the faithful political leaders and civil society to actively commit to defending the rights of the most vulnerable. It's not enough to denounce injustice. We must act to transform it, he insisted. His leadership inspired the creation of support networks, awareness campaigns, and public policies aimed at prevention and comprehensive care for victims. The importance of education and prevention. Leo XIV also championed education and prevention as fundamental tools to combat trafficking and exploitation. He promoted workshops, courses, and meetings to educate young people, families, and pastoral agents about risks and warning signs. The best way to fight exploitation is to empower people, give them tools to defend themselves and help others, he said. This preventive work saved many young women from falling into trafficking networks and raised greater social awareness about the seriousness of the problem. Education is the first step to freedom, he repeated. A legacy of compassion and justice. The human value and message of Leo XV have left a profound mark on Peru and on all who have known him. His testimony shows that it is possible to build a more just and inclusive society where the dignity of every person is respected and promoted. His example continues to inspire religious, social, and political leaders to commit themselves to the most vulnerable and to work for a world without exclusion or indifference. Today, as Pope Leo XIV continues to proclaim this message worldwide, his words and actions remind the Church of its essential mission to be a sign of hope, a house of mercy, and a defender of human dignity. His story in Peru is a constant invitation to look into the eyes of those who suffer, to listen to their stories, and to build together paths of inclusion and hope. Leo XIV's time in Peru, especially his work in Chiclayo, not only transformed the lives of the women he accompanied directly, but also left a deep mark on the ecclesial community and broader society. His pastoral style and commitment to the most vulnerable inspired many to rethink how they lived their faith and related to others. The legacy of his actions remains alive and continues to bear fruit long after his departure for Rome. Transformation of the local community. One of the most notable effects of Leo XIV's presence was the transformation of social perceptions toward women who were victims of trafficking and prostitution. In a culture where stigma and exclusion were the norm, his example of closeness and respect helped break down barriers and generate greater empathy. Before, nobody wanted anything to do with these women. Now many see them as sisters, daughters, mothers who deserve a second chance, says a community leader from Chiclayo. The awareness campaigns led by Prevost included workshops, talks, and outreach in schools, parishes, and the media. These initiatives not only informed people about the reality of trafficking, but also promoted values of solidarity and justice. Young people in particular felt called to action and began volunteering in support and prevention programs. Strengthening support networks. Leo XIV's work would not have been possible without the collaboration of a wide network of people and organizations. Under his leadership, alliances between the church, religious congregations, NGOs, local authorities, and private businesses were strengthened. These networks enabled the expansion of reintegration programs and ensured comprehensive support from psychological and legal assistance to job training and employment opportunities. Many women who managed to escape exploitation became agents of change themselves. Several joined as volunteers or staff in the very projects that had helped them, bringing their experience and empathy to new beneficiaries. This multiplying effect was key to building a resilient and supportive community. Change within the local church. Leo XIV's presence and leadership sparked a renewal within the local church. Many priests, religious sisters, and laypeople began to reconsider their mission and how they accompanied the most vulnerable. Bishop Robert taught us that charity is not just about giving alms, but about fighting for justice and dignity for all, says a sister from the Adorers. Inspired by him, new ministries and pastoral services were created to care for women at risk, street children, and displaced families. Parishes became more than places of worship. They became true centers of welcome and human development. Training for pastoral agents shifted toward greater social sensitivity and active listening. Inspiration for other dioceses and countries. The model developed in Chiclayo began to be replicated in other dioceses in Peru and neighboring countries. Bishops and pastoral leaders visited the diocese to learn firsthand about the programs and receive training. Leo XIV generously shared materials, methods, and resources, convinced that the fight against trafficking and exploitation should be a priority for the entire Latin American Church. At episcopal conferences and international gatherings, Prevost was invited to share his experience encouraging others to commit to the most vulnerable. His testimony inspired the creation of continental support networks and the drafting of church policies focused on prevention and comprehensive care for victims. Influence on public policy. Leo XIV's impact went beyond the church and reached civil authorities. Thanks to collaboration between the church and public institutions, progress was made in legislation and the implementation of policies to protect victims of trafficking. National awareness campaigns were promoted and care protocols were established in hospitals, police stations, and courts. Joint efforts helped identify and dismantle exploitation networks and provided real reintegration alternatives for survivors. Without the support of the Church and leaders like Monsignor Robert, we wouldn't have come this far, acknowledges an official from the Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations. A culture of solidarity and hope. Perhaps the most valuable fruit of Leo XIV's legacy is the culture of solidarity and hope he helped plant in the community. Many people who once lived closed off in indifference or fear began to open up to others, reach out, and commit to social causes. Young people in particular became leaders of prevention campaigns, volunteer activities, and social entrepreneurship projects. Stories of overcoming and second chances multiplied, inspiring the whole society. If they could move forward, so can I, said many women at risk. Hope stopped being an empty word and became a concrete reality, built day by everyone. A living legacy. Despite challenges and difficulties, Leo XIV's legacy continues in Peru and beyond. The projects he started keep growing, adapting to new realities and needs. His example continues to inspire religious, social, and political leaders not to settle for the status quo, but to dream and work for a more just and inclusive world. The community of Chiclayo, which witnessed his dedication firsthand, honors his memory with gratitude and commitment. The women who found in him a friend and defender are living proof that dignity and hope are possible even in the most difficult circumstances. Conclusion: an impact beyond time and place. Leo XIV's impact on the community and the Church is not limited to a particular time or place. His testimony is a constant invitation to look at others with compassion, to act with courage, and to build together a society where no one is discarded. His legacy is a reminder that change is possible when faith, love, and a commitment to justice come together. Today, as Pope Leo XIV continues to encourage the universal Church to be a field hospital, to go out to the margins, and to be a sign of hope for the world, his story in Peru is a beacon lighting the way for all who believe in the transformative power of compassion and solidarity. The legacy of Leo XIV, forged in the margins of Peru and solidified at the heart of the universal Church, has transcended borders and cultures. His testimony of closeness, compassion, and defense of the most vulnerable has inspired not only those who knew him personally, but also millions of people across the world. The admiration he now receives is not the result of grand speeches or spectacular gestures, but of a life lived with coherence, humility, and constant dedication to those most in need. International recognition of his work. Long before he was elected, Pope Robert Prevost was known in both ecclesial and social circles for his tireless work on behalf of women who were victims of trafficking and exploitation. International organizations such as Caritas, the Talitha Cum Network, and Amnesty International highlighted his holistic approach. He not only provided material help, but also promoted dignity, education, and social reintegration. His ability to build alliances between the Church, the state, and civil society, was seen as an innovative and effective model. When he was appointed prefect of the dicastery for bishops in the Vatican media outlets around the world highlighted his profile as a close committed pastor. Articles in the New York Times, Le Monde El País, and Vatican News underlined his trajectory in Peru and his sensitivity to social issues. A bishop with the smell of the sheep, some headlines read, echoing Pope Francis's call for pastors who walk with their people. Inspiration for leaders and communities. Leo XIV's example has been a source of inspiration for religious, social, and political leaders around the globe. In Latin America, bishops and priests have replicated his programs for accompaniment and prevention of trafficking, adapting them to local realities. In Europe, several dioceses have sought his advice to address the phenomenon of migration and the exploitation of women. In Africa and Asia, his testimony has been presented at international congresses and gatherings as a model of committed and transformative pastoral care. Leaders from other religious traditions and secular organizations have publicly recognized his contribution. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that compassion is the universal language that unites humanity, declared the director of a human rights NGO in Geneva. His life is a call to overcome prejudice and build bridges of solidarity. Impact on public opinion and the media. The election of Leo XIV as Pope was received with enthusiasm and hope by broad sectors of society. The media highlighted his humble profile and his history of service. Documentaries, interviews, and reports have told the story of his work in Peru, showing the human face of the Church and the transformative power of faith lived authentically. On social media, thousands of people shared testimonies, photos, and messages of gratitude. Hashtags such as Tauke Pope, of Hope, Compassion Without Borders, and Tant Leos of Inspires went viral, generating a wave of admiration and renewed commitment. Young people around the world organized solidarity and volunteer campaigns inspired by his example. Awards and honors. Throughout his life, Leo XIV has received numerous awards for his social and pastoral work. Universities, NGOs, and international organizations have honored him for his defense of human rights, the promotion of women, and the fight against trafficking. However, he has always accepted these honors with humility, reminding everyone that the real reward is seeing someone regain their dignity and hope. At one of his rare public appearances to receive an award, he said, "I do nothing extraordinary. I just try to live the gospel and be close to those who suffer most. We can all do something to change the world, even if it's just small acts of love." Testimonies of admiration and gratitude. The women he accompanied in Peru are the first to express their admiration and gratitude. Monsignor Robert was a father, a friend, and a defender, says Maria, one of the beneficiaries of the reintegration programs. I will never forget his respectful gaze and words of encouragement. Thanks to him, I believed in myself again, and in the goodness of people. Silvia Teodolinda Vasquez, social leader and close collaborator, highlights his ability to inspire others. He not only helped the women but taught us all to see with new eyes, to truly commit. His example lives on in everyone who decides to reach out to those in need. Even people who never met him personally feel touched by his story. Seeing a pope who has lived among the poor and understands the pain of the excluded gives us hope, says a young volunteer in Mexico. It's a sign that the Church can truly be a home for all. Influence on the universal Church. As Pope Leo XIV has continued to promote a Church that is close, inclusive, and committed to the most vulnerable. His first encyclicals and speeches have insisted on the need to go out to meet others, to listen to the cry of the discarded, and to build a culture of mercy. He has pushed for reform so that parishes become true centers of welcome, and for the voices of women and lay people to have greater prominence in church life. His leadership has inspired thousands of priests, religious and lay people to renew their commitment to social justice and the defense of human rights. Pope Leo XIV challenges us to be a church on the move, a church that's not afraid to get its hands dirty to heal the wounds of the world, says a Brazilian bishop. An example for the future. Admiration for Leo XIV is not limited to the present. His life and testimony are already part of the collective memory of the Church and humanity. For many, he is a model of ethical, humble, and courageous leadership, able to unite people of different cultures and beliefs around universal values. In schools, universities, and seminaries, his story is studied as an example of social commitment and gospel fidelity. In the poorest communities, his name is synonymous with hope and the possibility of change. In international forums, his voice is heard as that of a moral leader who is not afraid to denounce injustice and propose paths of reconciliation. The world's admiration for Leo XIV is ultimately a reflection of humanity's deep longing for authentic, compassionate, and courageous leaders. His life shows that reality can be transformed through small acts of love and a faith lived to the fullest. His example will continue to inspire present and future generations to reach out, break down barriers, and build a more just and humane world. The life and legacy of Leo XIV teach us that true greatness is not measured by titles or power, but by the capacity to love, to serve, and to restore dignity to every human being. His journey in Peru, marked by closeness to the most vulnerable and an unyielding fight for justice, stands as a beacon for all who believe in a more humane and fraternal world. Today, his example lives on in every act of compassion, in every community that welcomes the outcast, and in every person who chooses to reach out to those in need. Leo XIV reminds us that each of us can be a craftsman of hope, a sower of peace, and a builder of a society where no one is left behind. May his message continue to inspire present and future generations to look at others with eyes of mercy, to break the chains of indifference, and to always choose dignity and life. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope and humanity. If this message touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video so that the light of compassion and justice can reach even further. Until next time, may love and hope always guide your path.